I'm going to share with you guys what we've done pretty much over the last 10 years. I mean, 10 years and 20 minutes sounds like a lot, but we're going to cover this relatively quick. And I'm going to cover a wide variety of things. I think a lot of things were touched on already, a lot of topics. So let me jump right in here. So just a quick agenda. We're going to cover a little bit of background, who we are, who I am, what our vision was, how we got there, what the blueprint was. And again, what I'm talking about today is really a blueprint that we use for every software technology adoption that we do at NJM. So myself, 30 years experience in technology, played a variety of roles, currently responsible for keeping the machines on. I'll just keep going. Currently responsible for application server administration, data architecture, performance management, and a couple of other things. I've been with NJM for 14 years. I've had responsibilities for a lot of other areas within NJM, so I know the landscape, I know the people, I have the relationships. So moving to DevOps wasn't as hard of a problem as it would have been if I had been with the organization for a shorter period of time. And so we're based out of New Jersey. We're property casualty insurer. We're about $1.7 billion in policy premium. We're going through a transformation. We have a multi-year transformation initiative. So stepping back, I'll give you a little bit of history. Stepping back, insurance company, traditional legacy environment, COBOL mainframe. About 10 years ago, 12 years ago, we decided that we need to transform ourselves. We need to start looking at replacing all of our core business systems. I mean, you're talking about major business solutions across the organization that affect 2,500 people. At the time, this is going back again 12 years, we had about 130 people in IT. Today, there are 250. We actually use anywhere from 150 to 250 consultants. We're talking about major replacement of financials, HR systems, underwriting, claims. So it touched really every aspect of the organization. So it's not only just a technology change, but also a cultural change. And you're talking people who really only used to green screen, a few deployments every few months, not a big deal. We could handle it. It was a traditional way of working. And I used the word practical in the opening slide, but what we were doing wasn't really all that practical. I mean, to try to move to this world with new applications, new technologies across the board, going from COBOL mainframe to this, which is really a monolithic way of doing things, to a cross section of technologies that were really brand new, being introduced for the first time, and trying to leverage the same practices for deployment weren't going to work. You had people who understood COBOL. We didn't have really the skills here. When we decided to move to this way of developing, and again, it's really custom-built applications, some homegrown, so it's really a hodgepodge of things. Things have gotten much more complicated over the years. So some of the challenges we had, and again, these are probably some of the similar challenges everyone else has had. Increased complexities. I mean, we're talking about complexities across the board. Technology adoption, educating, retraining, re-engineering the infrastructure, geographic distribution of our teams. I mean, it used to be, the way we hired developers, we go to customer service, we'd ask people who wants to be a COBOL developer, and we'd bring them in, train them, and that's what we had. Now we had to go out and get people, acquire talent, develop talent. So there were some challenges there. The solutions themselves, COBOL was one system. It was one application. Very easy to identify, clear boundaries. Now we're talking about applications that cross boundaries. They're composite applications. There's integrations. There's disparate technologies. So it's very, very complicated in today's world. And the approach we were taking in the past, which was our development and deployment practice, weren't going to work. And we were quickly running into issues across the board. Environments. One mainframe, 2,000 VMs. Big difference. Hundreds of environments. And this is one of my biggest pain points, environments. You look at one application, one business solution, one code branch, you probably have anywhere from 10 to 20 environments. And the question is, why do you have so many environments? Well, we do a lot of QA testing. We have a lot of segregation of work. We have developers who want dev. We have QA, maybe 10 environments of QA. We have data advancement testing. We have regression testing. We have performance testing. We have data conversion, all kinds of different things. So that starts to become a major issue for us. And the number of deployments, again, it used to be a couple a month. Now we're talking hundreds a month, 1,000 plus a month, and it's growing as we speak. Limited number of resources. In this world, as we're trying to transition to it, because we had so many different technologies, we had to have specialists deploying technologies, all right? And typically it was the developer who who wrote the code deploying the technology to the environment it was going to. Not a good thing. So we started introducing tons of delays into our cycles, and we really couldn't keep pace. It was not practical to keep up with that. And visibility and auditability, non-existent. So I think, based on some of the earlier conversations and presentations, these kind of cover a lot of those things, and it really, we first had to admit we had a problem. Obviously, we had an issue here. Second thing we did, which I did, was I bought Dave's book. Very helpful. If you don't have it, pick it up. Skim through whatever you have to do. But it definitely sets a good framework for actually dealing with these types of issues. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but compliance, huge issue. We're a financial organization. We didn't have the visibility. We did not have all the controls we needed. We did a good job up until where we were, but we realized that there need to be improvements, many improvements. Someone asked earlier about what were some of the findings. One of our biggest findings was separation of duties and auditability. I mean, not being able to show what was where, what version of a product which was in an environment, who put it there. Those kinds of things became a real problem for us. We actually adopted the IDLE framework to try to deal with these things. Put a framework in place that addresses the controls that are required by our audit department, as well as handle some of the other issues like separation of duties. So we did carve out a team who just focused on what we call release to production, right? The release folks. They report to me. Every change gets a RFC. We have configuration management. So this is actually this happened before DevOps. So this was a good thing from a timeline perspective. Silo development teams. So again, we have 250 employees. We have up to 200 plus consultants working in teams that are very vertical. All right? They work vertically and they work horizontally, but in most cases, a lot of it's done vertically. They each have the priorities and timelines. They do overlap. So that, again, was another challenge. How do you get the visibility? What's touching what? A lot of common components. You're dealing with integration, which I'm sure all of you guys are doing. How do you ensure that the code that needs to be in place for these things to work doesn't break the systems you're supporting? How do you ensure that's going to work? How do you put the processes in place to do the automated testing and things like that? We did not have a tool, and we were kind of doing it manually. In a lot of cases, especially in the non-production world, I'll stick to non-prod because we actually did pretty good in production. We really didn't know what was deployed where. We had a lot of pointers. We call pointers in our infrastructure. Application A, version 1, in development pointed to instance 2 of this, but in another environment pointed to instance 3. You move that up to another environment, you have all kinds of things breaking. That was a major issue for us, and we spent many hours trying to determine what was going on. Because most of the configuration for that was being handled by the developers themselves. And if they forgot to put in the changes before migration, they just got moved. So you may have UAT pointing to dev pointing to Q. So there was a lot of issues like that. Small teams, centralized support team, the team responsible for supporting the 500-ish developers, that's it. 3 on the ALM side, 2 on the APM side, and 3 on the App Server Administration side. And again, these people were really specialists in their area. So a person who maybe knew how to deploy the policy system, not necessarily knew how to deploy the claim system. It was a very manually intensive process. So, where do you begin and how do you start? I mean, this is a big problem, but really it's not a big problem if you step back and think about it. And like Dave said, there are always going to be issues. We're here to solve them. If there were no issues, we wouldn't have jobs. So, the tendency is really to jump into, let's go buy a tool. Let's go find a tool, right? But that's really the wrong answer. The right answer is step back and understand what your issues are. And then find the right people. Get the buy-in, make the case, understand the problem. Pick the right team. Make sure you have the buy-in from the people who are influencers in your organization, because they're going to pull everyone else along. Ownership and accountability. Folks, when they hear there's a solution, they want it. They also have to be part of the solution. They have to participate. Right? So make sure people understand what their roles are and what their responsibilities are. And to be honest with you, this wasn't a hard thing for us. We're a mid-sized company, but we operate like a small company. We have one physical location. We all work within 50 feet of each other. And again, being there 14 years for me, it was relatively easy to get the people I needed involved. And my boss, my manager, he supported this 100%. Keep it simple. Don't try to solve every problem day one. Have a multi-year or multi-month rollout plan. Small wins, show successes, and communicate regularly. Make sure people are in the loop. I use email. I'm not a huge fan of email. I like face-to-face conversations. I think you get a lot more done that way. That's my style here. So again, first round of conversations with my people. Bring them in the room, present the idea, here's what we're thinking. And these are the responses I got. Why are we doing this? Things are working fine. We're getting by. We're getting by, but we're getting by with major delays. Sometimes you start accepting those delays, it just becomes the norm. We didn't see it that way. I didn't see it that way. The pace at which we work is increasing. The velocity needs to increase. Our ability to deploy more often is increasing. Business demands are increasing. So, you have to kind of convince them that that's really not the way to think going forward. This exact quote came out of one of the meetings. What am I going to do? What about my job? It's going to limit my job. What am I going to do after this is in place? And you get resistance. And it's like, you need to get on board because this is the future. Should we build? Then it gets start getting interest. Should we build a tool? We've done those things in the past. They don't always work out so well. It's not really a great approach. Now these guys consider themselves deployment engineers. Automation deployment engineers. So they see themselves as a value add to the organization. They're not doing manual work. They're not sitting there hitting the keyboards. They're really doing higher level work, engineering work. So once folks got on board, we had to define what problems we were trying to solve. So starting with, what was the pipeline? We have to define this thing called a pipeline. First thing is, what is a pipeline? And there's a little education that had to happen there. But it's really the features and functions that you want to support in your delivery of software technology, right? And you need to put in the pieces that make sense. Do what's necessary. And that really came out of the conversations we had with the application development teams. This wasn't a siloed conversation with my folks. It was a combination of my folks and some other folks defining what we wanted to accomplish. So it was a very clear picture of what the future looked like. And you could get sucked into that over-engineering, but try to stay away from that. Processes, we had to assess every deployment process for every technology and understand what steps were involved, where we want to do automation. And my goal was really 100% automation for all the steps. I mentioned environments earlier, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but we did have to solve the environment problem. The way our code was written, all of the property files were in a package for each technology that was specific to the environment it was being deployed to. So you had to have builds for specific environments. That's unmanageable. Dependencies, like I said earlier, there's no one single application anymore. There's no one COBOL program. These are every deployment's minimum 3, maximum 15 different things that have to get deployed for the systems to work and continue to function. So how do you ensure that's going to continue to work? And that's complex. Build automation. We'd had a little bit of build automation already in place. We dabbled with it, and it was working pretty well, but we needed to put it into the big picture, into the pipeline, and build these automation scripts. And process visibility, that was huge. Knowing what's where, what pointers are pointing to what, when it was deployed, huge for us, huge for auditing. A lot of consumers of that information. So selecting a tool, we looked at a few tools. I like to call it best of need versus best of breed because, you could buy these tools that are so huge and do so many different things that it becomes overwhelming and you really don't accomplish what you want to accomplish. The question is, what is DevOps to you? What is it to me? It's 2 different things. It could be 10 different things. It's really what problems are you trying to solve and how do you engineer a solution that you call DevOps to accomplish the things that you want to accomplish. These were ours. Ability to deploy to environments agnostically. Instead of building applications that were specifically built for a specific environment, let's externalize that. Let's make that data-driven. Let's find a tool that can actually help us get there. A single framework for all technology deployments. One pipeline. We may not execute every step in the pipeline, but we're going to take one pipeline because when it comes time to audit or make change, we go to one place. We don't have a specific way of doing things for specific technology. Simple and intuitive. Again, we're not looking for an application that's unmanageable, where we have to build yet another team to manage a tool that's unmanageable. We've had those issues. And we looked at, I would say, 3 or 4 tools before we decided to select XL Deploy through XEB Labs. We had specific requirements: continuous delivery, schedule, self-service. I am huge on self-service. Most of our delays in the non-production environments have been solved through self-service. Integration support, we want to be able to integrate. It's all about integration in our world today. Again, insurance company, you don't really think of yourselves as a technology company. We're all technology companies today. We realize that now. Feature rich out of the box. We didn't want to have a product that we had to build around, although we know there's going to be some things that are going to be gaps, and we wanted a technology that could be extended without tying us into a build of the technology that limited us or prevented us from taking an upgrade. and Audible is huge, is huge, I should say. So this is our pipeline. So again, not a tremendous amount of steps, but we start from our source control system. We have a build process. We use a product called CodeNarc for static code analysis, GUnit, Jacaco for code test coverage, and XLDeploy for deployments. So that's our build automation process. That's our deployment tool. We also have Dynatrace, which is an APM solution for monitoring, deep application monitoring. And for smoke testing, HP and NeoLoad. NeoLoad for performance load, HP for the use case testing. And that's the deployment pipeline. Now, there's a couple steps missing out here that I didn't add, but I just mentioned real quick. We also have a step in for security enforcement. We have a product called Fortify. And we're also looking to incorporate the automation of RFC opening and closing just for traceability and trackability for our auditing department. Any questions on that? Good. So we had to decide, what were our target environments? Again, let's keep things in focus. Let's make sure we can do the things we want to do in a reasonable time frame. And we picked the technologies on the left, Java, .NET. I don't know if anyone's a Data Power user, but that's an IBM integration platform. We're a heavy user of that. Informatica for our ETL data integration technologies, and SQL reporting services. Those 5 technologies make up around 1,000 to 2,000 deployments a month. On the right-hand side, these were the deployment targets and some of the technologies that we also use to support us. And the first 2 you probably know. The third one, DP Buddy, that was a scripting language we bought for automating configuration of the Data Power technology. So we used it's from a company called MyArch, DP Buddy. That allows us to create what we call these plugins for XLDeploy. So we're adding those as standard technologies to the XLDeploy tool, so they also are repeatable. So when you go into the tool and you want to pick a Data Power function, it's there. It requires a few parameters, and yet it's the same process over and over again. Another product called Delphix. Does anyone here use Delphix? Use Delphix? I'll explain Delphix in 1 minute. Delphix takes a very large database, compresses it down to a very small size, and from that small size, if you take a 500 gig database, compress it down to 150 gig, 200 gig, you can provision databases from that Delphix database, they call virtual database, as another virtual database. The nice thing about that is the database that was 500, that became 200, is 1 megabyte. You can provision those databases in minutes. Huge for us, huge. And that's not even the good part about that technology. That technology, the real value comes when you need to incorporate things like backup and recovery into your deployment process where, let's say for an application, our policy system, it's not 1 database, it's 3, it's 5. You can define a set of databases as that's 1 set. In XLDeploy, you can call out to the plugin, say take a backup of what we call a bookmark, and within 3 minutes, all of those databases are backed up to a single point in time, that if you had to roll back, you can then do the undo, which takes about 5 minutes. We're a SQL shop. This is a SQL, again, I don't mean to be a commercial, but it really made a difference in our QA cycle. Our QA cycles used to take weeks. Define your QA cycle, run your unit tests, restore all databases, we got to run them again. Do it again. Time was of the essence. Here, this is yet another self-service technology where they can actually do the deployment themselves because we give them that capability through XLDeploy. When XLDeploy runs, it takes a bookmark because we told XLDeploy to do that. And when they're done, they can actually go into Delphix, say restore to the previous bookmark, rerun the test again, change the test. So that's a huge win for us. Okay, I need to move this. All right, so from a redesign perspective, we had to do work to our applications. This was probably the biggest pain point for us. We had to take those applications, externalize the property files, translate them into dictionaries, which if you guys are XLDeploy or not, that allows us to take the information that's required for a specific environment, create a dictionary associated with that environment. When a deployment occurs, XLDeploy replaces all of the variables with the actual data we want for the environment. And that took us about 30 days. We were able to really leverage a lot of the existing knowledge that we had to actually define that. It took about 2 weeks to get that actually incorporated into the applications. It took about another 30 days to roll it through the environment. So it really was a timing issue versus a work issue. And when we first got into the room, this sounded like a huge problem. But once we understood it and we defined what we wanted to accomplish, it really made sense, and it was really much more manageable process. We also decided that since all of our major business applications, at least a good handful of them, use the same style of reading properties, yet they all had different property file readers. I mean, the code that read the property files was different. Why not just write one piece of code that does it the same way? Create a standard set of libraries or property file names that they all use, and standardize on the values, because a lot of the values are used across multiple systems. So for instance, like something that did a address verification, we do that in all of our systems. You know, you enter a new address, go check, see if it's valid, come back. Every system was implementing it differently. We re-engineered that to be consistent across the board. So standardization is huge. Repeatability is huge. The entire process was about 60 days, and we're live with Excel Deploy for all of our major business applications, automated deployments today. I covered that already, refactoring, rollout. And, you know, the success factors. Why were we successful? Why do we feel we're successful? We're not done, by the way. We're not even close to being done. We got support. We got buy-in. We made it a priority. It wasn't something we did in our spare time. We kept it simple. We looked for quick wins. And, you know, we really tried to standardize everything we developed or defined was reusable. Now, there's obviously some exceptions, but we're going for the 80-20 rule. So in 2014, we had 0 automated deployments, but we decided to define our vision. Always start with the plan first and the vision first. Once you understand that, you know what your problems are and what problems you're trying to solve and what you're trying to get, then you start your product selection. You know, ours started around second quarter 2014. We purchased Excel Deploy, and I think we purchased Delphix around the same time because we were trying to solve multiple problems there. 2015, we did the installs, we trained. We didn't just train the 3 people who did deployments. We trained 10 people that work in my area, and we trained all of the technical leads that were going to be supporting us. So they understood exactly what was going on under the covers, no surprises. Full transparency. And now we're doing about 800 deployments a month automated. It's not continuous integration because we just don't work that way yet, but we have all the capabilities to do it. So we are doing scheduled. We're doing some continuous, and we're doing a lot of self-service. And self-service was probably one of the biggest improvements for us. Eliminated reliance on specialty skilled technicians. We literally have trainees deploying in production because really their job is just press a button. You know, if there's an issue, they make a call, but in most cases, the deployments they work. They work. And as we incorporate more and more smoke testing and unit testing, more smoke testing, and use case testing, we will be that much better off because today our business folks are up at 2 in the morning with us logging in, making sure things work. If they can, once we have the opportunity, we'll get that feedback, look to automate that as well. So the entire deployment process will be automated. And, you know, the time it takes to deploy has substantially reduced, and the number of people has reduced. You know, we used to have 10 people on the phone. You had a DBA, an app server administration, more than one developer. So it was always, you know, an army of people doing these deployments. Now you probably have around 1 or 2 people. This is just a real picture. I guess the arrow was off a little bit, but you can see when we started last year with the deployments, we started creeping up. It's a little bit older slide. It's about 600 the month of April. We're probably up to about 800 right now. I'm hoping to get to around 1,000 to 1,200 by end of year. That's my goal. And again, it doesn't end. It's continuous improvement. Lots of things to do. We got lots of applications. We started with the high volume ones. We get the biggest buyback there, highest value of return. But we have a lot of little .NET applications that we want to deploy. Data Power, again, it's a huge platform for us, so we have to get that rolling. We are looking at some other things like Excel Release. We like Excel Release. We actually own some Excel Release, but we're just looking for time to get it in. The focus today is really on deployment automation. And I think biggest miss. The biggest miss we had was we thought we could do it the same way we always worked. We realized that very quickly that we could not keep pace. I think the smart thing we did was we defined a vision. We understood. We took the time to understand our issues and define what our future state should look like. And I think that's it.